So you've been with the company for a long time on the screen as a wrestler. After your retirement, do you see yourself maybe doing like a backstage as a producer or even just working with the talent in the future?
Great question. So here's where we give you some of the deets of the farewell tour. It's not going to end at WrestleMania. WrestleMania will be my last WrestleMania. But hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, we're going straight through from January to December. We're going to try to do a long list of dates. I think right now, tentatively, it's hovering in the mid-30s to 40s because I'm still going to try to juggle a lot of stuff that's going on. And that'll be the end of my in-ring competition. Now, a part of this business plan, I guess, that I proposed and they accepted, thank you, they, was me remaining in the WWE family in some capacity for an extended time to come. I've always said to the audience that the WWE is my home and I love it. And just because I physically feel I'm at my end doesn't mean I need to distance myself from something I love. I have passion for this business. I still watch Money in the Bank and yell at the screen and yell at the guys for what they're doing or what they could be doing. So I feel I have some wisdom locked up here that could be of some value. So I look forward to ending my participation in the ring in the best way that I possibly can and being a member of the extended WWE family for quite some time to come.
I mean, that's basically the journey that I've been on, right? Started off very pro free speech, free expression, and then over the last 10 years, there have been these two big episodes. It was the Trump election and the aftermath, where I feel like in retrospect, I deferred too much to the kind of critique of the media on what we should do. And since then, I think generally trust in media has fallen off a cliff, right? So I don't think I'm alone in that journey. I think that's basically the experience that a lot of people have had is, okay, it's the stuff that's being written about is not kind of all accurate. And even if the facts are right, it's kind of written from a slant a lot of the time.
Of course.
And then there was the government version of it, which was during COVID, which is okay. Like, it's like our government is telling us that we need to censor true things. It's like, this is a disaster. And it's not just the U.S., right? I think a lot of people in the U.S. focus on this as an American phenomenon, but I kind of think that the reaction to COVID probably caused a breakdown in trust in a lot of governments around the world. Because 2024 was a big election year around the world, and there are all these countries, India, just like a ton of countries that had elections, and the incumbents basically lost every single one. So there is some sort of a global phenomenon where the whether it was because of inflation, because of the economic policies to deal with COVID, or just how the governments dealt with COVID, seems to have had this effect that's global, not just the U.S., but like a very broad decrease in trust, at least in that set of incumbents, and maybe in sort of these democratic institutions overall. So I think that what you're saying of, how do people get their information now? It's by sharing it online on social media. I think that that's just increasingly true. And my view at this point is like, all right, like we started off focused on free expression. We kind of had this pressure tested over the last period. I feel like I just have a much greater command now of what I think the policies should be. And like, this is how it's going to be going forward. And so I'm at this point, I think a lot of people look at this as like a purely political thing. It's because they kind of look at the timing and they're like, hey, well, you're doing this right after the election. It's like, okay, I try not to like change our content rules like right in the middle of an election either, right? It's like, there's not like a great time to do this. It's
right.
Which basically empowered these third-party fact checkers. They could mark stuff false, and then we would downrank it in the algorithm. I think what Twitter and X have done with community notes, I think is just a better program. Rather than having a small number of fact checkers, you get the whole community to weigh in. When people usually disagree on something, tend to agree on how they're voting on a note, that's a good sign to the community that there's actually like a broad consensus on this, and then you show it. And you're showing more information, not less, right? So you're not using the fact check as a signal to show less. You're using the community note to provide real context and show additional information. So I think that that's better. For when you're talking about like nation states or people interfering, a lot of that stuff is best rooted out at the level of kind of accounts doing phony things. So you get like, whether it's like China or Russia or Iran or like one of these countries, they'll set up these networks of fake accounts and bots, and they coordinate and they post on each other's stuff to make it seem like it's authentic and kind of convince people it's like, wow, a bunch of people must think this or something. And the way that you identify that is you build AI systems that can basically detect that those accounts are not behaving the way that a human would. And when we find that there's like some bot that's operating an account.
How do you differentiate? How do you figure that out?
There are some things that a person just would never do, right? So,
have you met Lex Friedman?
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
He might not be.
Well, but is he going to
pass your
But is he
Turing
going to take?
test?
Yeah, no. Is he going to take him? Is he going to make a million actions in a minute? It's like,
might.
yeah, probably not.
Okay, so it's that. It's
it's
things that aren't
more
possible?
subtle than that. I think these guys are pretty sophisticated, and it's an adversarial space. So, so we find some technique, and then they basically kind of update their techniques. But we have a team of it's effectively like intelligence, counterintelligence folks, counterterrorism folks, AI folks who are building systems to identify what are these accounts that are just not behaving the way that people would, and how are they interacting, and then sometimes you trace it down, and sometimes you get some tips from different intelligence agencies, and then you can kind of piece together over time. It's like, oh, this network of people is actually some kind of fake cluster of accounts, and that's against our policies, and then we just take them all off. But
how are you sure? Like, is there a 100% certainty that you are definitely getting a group of people that are bad actors, or is it just people that have unpopular opinions?
No, I don't think it's that for this. I think.
But what I'm saying is, how do you determine?
Yeah.
Like, how do you at what percentage of accuracy are you determining it? Do you ever accidentally think that people that are going to get moderated are actually just real people?
Yes, I think for the specific problem around these like large coordinated groups doing kind of like election interference or something, it's a large enough group. We have like a bunch of people analyzing it. It's like they study it for a while. I think we're probably pretty accurate on that. But I actually think one of the bigger issues that we have in our moderation system is this precision issue that you're talking about. And that is actually, of all the things that we announced this week, in terms of how we're going to update the content policies, changing the content filters to have to require higher confidence and precision is actually going to be the thing that reduces the vast majority of the censorship mistakes that we make. Right? Removing the fact checkers and replacing them with community notes, I think it's a good step forward. Like a very small percent of content is fact checked in the first place, so is that going to make the hugest difference? I'm not sure. I think it'll be a positive step though. And we like opened up some content policies, so some stuff that was restricted before we opened up. Okay, that's good. It'll mean that some set of things that might have been censored before are not. But by far the biggest set of issues we have, and you and I have talked about a bunch of issues like this over the years, is like, it's just, okay, you have some classifier it's trying to find, say, like drug content, right? People decide, okay, it's like the opioid epidemic is a big deal. We need to do a better job of cracking down on drugs and drug sales, right? I don't want people dealing drugs on our networks. So we build a bunch of systems that basically go out and try to automate finding people who are dealing drugs. And then you basically have this question, which is how precise do you want to set the classifier? So do you want to make it so that the system needs to be 99% sure that someone is dealing drugs before taking them down? Do you want it to be 90% confident, 80% confident? And then those correspond to amounts of, I guess the statistics term would be recall. What percent of the bad stuff are you finding? So if you require 99% confidence, then maybe you only actually end up taking down 20% of the bad content. Whereas if you reduce it and you say, okay, we're only going to require 90% confidence, now maybe you can take down 60% of the bad content. But let's say you say, no, we really need to find everyone who's doing this bad thing. And it doesn't need to be as severe as dealing drugs. It could just be, it could be any kind of content of any kind of category of harmful content.